Oh, good evening and welcome to another conversation in our Let's Talk Bridging the Divide. I'm Rachel Platt, the Director of Community Engagement here at the Fraser History Museum. And tonight we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, women. And look at the women I have with me tonight. More specifically, LeadHERship. And I want to make sure we hear the her in that when we say LeadHERship. What makes a good leader? And the question, is it the same for both men and for women? Joining me to help lead this discussion tonight is a woman who is greatly admired, Renee Shaw with KET, admired by me and so many others. Hey, Renee.
Hi, Rachel, and I admire you. And we were having such a good girl love fest right live before, because I think we all have high girl crushes on each other, and it's just a pleasure to be in this kind of space where we can celebrate each other. And I'm so appreciative of being with you tonight. You know, part of my job at KET is covering politics, as I've gotten to cover two of our panelists tonight. I hope they're well rested from a session that seemed like it went on for 9,500 days. They both serve in the House of Representatives, and we'll introduce them in just a moment. But Representative Colonel, so she's got lots of titles. Representative Colonel Pamela Stephenson becomes the second Black woman to currently serve in the Kentucky House, and Representative Samara Heavrin became the youngest female ever to serve when she was elected in 2019. So we've got some history makers with us. We'll be talking with them about what they bring to the table in those roles.
That's right. And speaking of politics, for the first time ever, we have, of course, a female vice president with Kamala Harris, another glass ceiling broken, and more discussions about female leaders and making inroads in places we haven't been before. And this headline catching my attention recently, I consider it really the ultimate in multitasking for female leaders. Head basketball coach Adia Barnes of Arizona, remember that story, pumping breast milk for her child during halftime of the NCAA's championship game.
You know, her 6-month-old baby girl was hungry, right? And sideline reporter Holly Rose said, for those who think that this is TMI, too much information, let's normalize working mothers and all they have to do and juggle. We'll be getting into that discussion tonight as well. And we are keeping it real for sure, because the times, they are changing, isn't that right?
We hope, right? We're going to be talking about that. And since we're keeping it real, we want to share this with you as well. More headlines about women. This one saying there are more women at the top. It has led to higher returns, and women-led companies perform 3 times better than S&P 500.
And if that's true, then why do we still have so few women at the top in many fields? We'll have more numbers on that in just a few minutes. And that question leads us to this right here. This doesn't still exist, does it? Sorry, you are simply not the right man for the job. Well, our panelists will be weighing in.
And we know that you have questions for our panelists, so we want to let you know some of the rules. Write them in the chat feature in the Q&A if you're on Zoom, and of course the comment section if you're watching us on Facebook Live. Speaking of questions, I always like to ask our audience questions. We want to start with one for you in the audience. And the question, do we value the same qualities in women and men in society? So we're starting with this question. Now read it carefully. What traits do you value most in females? Is it intelligence, and that one doesn't have an A or a B by it, or empathy, honesty and morality, strength and toughness, or physical attractiveness? So out of those, answer, what traits do you value most in females? So if you're in our audience, go ahead and weigh in. We're going to give you a second there, and then we'll show the results, and then we have another question that we'll talk about. So what traits do you value most in females? We'll bring up the answer. The number one answer is honesty and morality with 52%, followed by strength and toughness. So let's remember that. Honesty and morality, followed by strength and toughness. Renee?
So that's interesting. Now we want to ask you that same question for men, the trait that is most important. Again, is it A, intelligence, B, empathy, C, honesty and morality, D, strength and toughness, or E, physical attractiveness? So go ahead and weigh in on that. This time, remember, we're talking about men. and we'll give you a minute just to answer that. Should be very interesting, Rachel, about these answers. So go ahead, make your score here, and we will get the results here in just a bit. I can't wait to see this. Okay, well, look at this. So you value the same, right? See, honesty and morality, 45%, a whopping 45%.
But interestingly, the backup answer, the second most voted on for men was intelligence, and for women, it was strength and toughness.
Right. So what does that say?
I don't know. Well, we're going to be talking about that. That is for sure. All right. We have a lot to talk about tonight. This is just part of it. There was a national poll that was done, so we're going to talk about that in just a second. Now to our panelists, and you can see them right here. Gretchen Hunt, the Executive Director of Emerge Kentucky, whose mission is to increase the number of Democratic women from diverse backgrounds in public office.
We also have with us Cynthia Napick, the president of LeadHERship Louisville, and comes to the table with plenty of insight about this topic.
Carolyn Tandy, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Texas Roadhouse.
Representative and Colonel Pamela Stevenson, a Democrat who represents Kentucky House District number 43.
And Representative Samara Hebron, a Republican who represents Kentucky House District 18. Also say hello to Ron Jones, the Community Relations Manager with 104.7 FM WLOU and 1240 AM WLLV. He's going to be facilitating our questions tonight, and how brave of him to venture in as our lone male in this panel of spectacular women tonight. Ron, we'll be getting with you in just a few seconds. We want to get the conversation started right now with the question we asked of our audience about traits that are most valued in men and women. We asked the question because I read a recent article that says the public has very different views about what society values in men and women. For men, the number one answer in that poll that I saw was honesty and morality. For women, it was physical attractiveness and empathy.
So let's ask each of our panelists this question. What traits do you value most in men and women leaders? And are those traits different based on gender? Let's start with you, Gretchen Hunt.
Thank you, Renee. I had to find the unmute button for a minute. And thank you for being included with such an esteemed panel of women. I think that we look for leaders who we can trust and who are competent. And beyond that, especially in times that are so demanding of a moral compass, we demand people who have strong values of equity and justice and a sense of commitment to the greater good. And I think across different races, whether it's local school board or who you elect for governor, I think that's what we're looking for in leaders.
And I'm curious if you all think it differs between men and women, or do we look the same thing? So let's bring you into that conversation, Cynthia Napick of LeadHERship Louisville. You have a lot to say about studies. Do we look for different things in men and women?
I think that we ultimately our biggest thing right now is authenticity. I think that's one of the things that we should be looking for in all our leaders. But it is interesting. One of the things that we've been doing lately is a lot of dig in and figure out, well, what does the research tell us about women in leadership? This one that you're showing right now is actually a huge study. It was a study we liked because the study was actually just looking at what do we want in 21st century leaders. So this book kind of asked a similar question is, hey, what do we want from our leaders? 64,000 people. And then they asked that first question, what do you want in your leader? Got the top list. And then they did a second round where they asked, do you think these traits are masculine or feminine? Just basically, obviously they're not specifically all the time masculine or feminine, but when you think of this trait, which way does it lean? So of the top 10 traits that we are looking for in our 21st century leaders, which is a little different now than it might've been 50 years ago, women they're predominantly, they share 8 of the 10. That is what we want out of our leaders. And women are fantastic at it. So this is one of the things that I always like to start with. When I talk to women, sometimes we kind of get that feeling of oh, I don't know. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I strong enough? So the first answer is you are. You are exactly what people want in their 21st century leaders. In this study, women had 8 of the 10 things that we're looking for in our leaders. So I think that that's kind of our starting point is we're just looking for these things that happen to be things women are inherently spectacular at.
I love that.
Yeah, we always know that women always are more apt to doubt themselves. And Carol and Tandy, you have a background in politics too. You've been a public servant, and we know that women are often hesitant to get into the political sphere because they feel like they're not good enough. And that's a commentary that Gretchen Hunt could also respond to. But to you first, Carolyn, and now that you're with Texas Roadhouse, how do you see what we just saw in those results that Cynthia just shared?
Well, I find it interesting because even the question that was in the poll around, strength and toughness, to me, going back to honesty and morality, you have to have a certain level of strength and toughness to be able to exhibit honesty and morality. And some of those same traits are things that, again, inherently are in women. But it's about being able to, again, see yourself in a role that you may not be able to have the right representation already existing there. That takes a different level of tenacity, to be able to see yourself in a role that you don't see representation of yourself in. Men are able to see themselves in these roles because there's plenty of them there. And so when they look up that ladder, they see representation, they see reflections of themselves. So even if they don't have all the characteristics that they need, they still can be able to see that reflection up there and be able to go for it. Whereas for us, we tend to be a little bit more reserved. We tend to try and check all the boxes. I mean, we'll make sure we check all the boxes before we even step forward. So part of what we have to do, particularly as women, as we're raising women, as we're influenced by women, as we're in organizations with other women, is to make sure that they know that they have everything that they need. Just to Cynthia's point, they have everything that they absolutely need to be able to be a great leader just as they are. They don't need to actually be able to look up that ladder and see someone. They can be who we're looking up to. They can be the ones that are the representative that we're seeking.
Pam Stevenson, we're going to have you weigh in next. Oh, unmute yourself. There you go.
That was just a test. It's unusual because for me, being in the military, I was told you smile too much to make it in this man's military. And I thought that was cute. But I was brought up differently, that I had to first be strong and tough because you didn't know what the world was going to throw at you, and then fill in the rest. And so I agree with my esteemed, beautiful colleagues that women can be both bold and brilliant and smart. We try to categorize women one way, and usually we try to keep them out of the business world, the leadership roles, by saying girls don't run, girls don't wear pants, girls do certain things, all which would lead to you thinking that you can't lead. But in the truth of the matter, as we saw by the polls and by what we've seen, we have everything we need to be the leader that this community can count on. And we just need to own it and embrace it.
That's all right. Representative Heverin, you can speak maybe from a youth perspective, since you are the youngest member in the Kentucky General Assembly. How does all of that compound the issue of also being female?
Yeah, actually, I would like to replace the word traits with expectations, because I think that there are different expectations for men versus women. But to what Cynthia said, I also want to share two real life. I want to apply two real world instances that I experienced. Whenever it came time for the opportunity for me to run, whenever the former representative when he resigned, I started getting all these calls. Who are we going to get to run from Grayson County? Who are we going to get to run? And I never thought about myself. And I remember I used to work for Kentucky State Treasurer Allison Ball, and she would always, when she would speak to women, she would say, it's always said that women have to be asked to run. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I wonder if that's really true. Like, do women really have to be asked? But then I realized at that instance, until someone asked me, I never considered myself for this position. And so it's so true. And so if we can start encouraging, anytime I speak to a group of women, I'm like, I'm asking you to run, whether that's public, for public office or just seeking a higher leadership position. We need more voices, but also for representation. When I made my decision to run, one of my best friends, her name's Lauren, we were sitting there and she said, Samara, you've got to show young women that they have a role in the General Assembly. We want little girls to look up to you and say, hey, I see myself myself, I can be a representative. And so through that, I hope with my youth in the General Assembly that I am representation for young girls to have the courage to run for office and seek leadership positions. And I agree with what my great esteemed panelists said as well with the different traits. I think a lot of people look for transparency and honesty, but I really like the empathy thought too, because whenever people feel that they can connect with us as leaders, I think we're able to make better policy decisions and better decisions all in all. So those are my thoughts.
Well, and I want everybody to know that they can jump in, because Cynthia, I see that you said women at the top often say they did not step up and step out until someone tapped them, which is kind of what Samara said. You wait to be asked instead of, just typically go on, I'm going to run. It's almost like somebody has to say, Shazam, I didn't think of that. So we want to talk about that. Did you want to weigh in, Cynthia, before we go on?
Yeah, so there's a Korn Ferry study that interviewed not all, but a good portion of the women who have ever been Fortune 500 CEOs. There's only been 98. They interviewed 48 of the 98 women who've been Fortune 500 CEOs, and they asked them about their leadership journey. And of them, 3 of the 48 said, I never actually wanted it. I still don't want it. I was kind of forced into a victim of circumstance. 5 of them said, baby, I was born that way. Man, I just knew it from the cradle. The other 40 women all cited a particular person in their life who said, did you know you were fabulous? Did you understand that about yourself? Because I see that in you. And it wasn't until someone else tapped them and said, you are really spectacular, and I want to help lift you up. And for me, that's just simple math, right? As if that's that little cadre of Fortune 500 women, what could we do if we all just
Well, why don't we see that when we look in the mirror? And let's, Gretchen, you pick up on that, because that was my next question about.
Well,
I have to tap them.
Yeah, I think we're interdependent in some ways, and there's a value in that we like to be asked. I want women to step up, but the fact that we depend on others is a trait that is actually a powerful thing. So if we can build those networks, and one of the things I think about is that so often in my career, whether I was working alongside survivors of violence who we worked with to be survivor leaders, championing legislation in the legislature, or now at Emerge, is holding up a mirror to women. To Carolyn's point, so often people already have those inherent leadership skills. It is simply that reflected image that we can give back to women to say, look at all these traits that you already have them. And so to me, I see some possibility there in ways that we are interdependent sometimes in how we network that are powerful. And so if we can build that network more broadly, we can keep asking women, but we can show each other what those strengths are. And again, that's what I see happening in our Emerge class. And I just want to point out too, to Carolyn's point, we need a lot more women of color, a lot more LGBTQ women in positions of power, a lot more first generation immigrant women, because those networks really have to center around them right now. And that's as much as we talk about women, that's really who we should be centering on right now, because that's where you have the least representation. And that's just key, I think, to what we're talking about.
I think the point that Representative Heverin made earlier about expectations versus traits, that she likes the word expectations. And it's interesting, Carla Burton said in the chat, it's interesting to see that decisive is considered a masculine trait, yet as women who are leaders, we are criticized when we're making decisions. And I want Cynthia to go back to you, because your organization is all about cultivating leadership, and you've seen many leaders come and go. So tell us where we've made strides and where we still need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of that has to do with the unconscious bias, right? It's difficult. We're a TOO something, to this, to that. And unconscious bias has a whole lot to do with how we're viewed and rated and evaluated for our decision making and all of those other things. But if we want to look at, well, where are we in the spectrum? How are we actually doing? I always start with saying we're fantastic. We're naturally gifted. We are the kinds of people that that teams want to be led by. And also there's some other things that we need to keep our eye on because we're not where we need to be. And even though we're out achieving men in terms of degree attainment, which should be a predictor, right, of how far we go in our careers, it's not, because we enter the workforce at about the same, but somewhere in the pipeline, women keep falling out, right? For each step in the journey, we lose more women. This particular slide says there's only 15% in executive leadership positions. This next one that you're looking at, this next one that you're looking at kind of tracks. So how do you get there, right? Is if you start at loosely equivalent, entering 50, 52, 48, every promotion opportunity, women fall out of that leadership pipeline. So looking at each of those as a window, as an opportunity, is a good way for us to chart our path to success. Because right now we're not there. And if you want to look at the microcosm that is the really big seat, right? That's your big CEO seat. And this one's interesting too, because this one is definitely not where we need to be. I mean, in one regard, so we should all be really excited because my slide here, this data is out of date. It's no longer good. I don't know if anyone wants to drop into the chat if anyone knows why this is no longer good data. We are celebrating because last fall, Clorox appointed a woman as a CEO. And last month, another woman joined the ranks of Fortune 500 CEOs. If anyone knows who she is, they can drop it in the chat and you'll get 2 bonus points for knowing that we're celebrating during Women's History Month. Rosalind Brewer took over the helm of Walgreens. She's particularly interesting because she is currently the only Black woman who is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Later this year, a second Black woman will join the ranks. And so that will get us to 40. So it's kind of one of those like, yay. I mean, you know, and I'm so happy and excited for those women who are the beacons, who are, you know, forging that path and looking at that pipeline. We have some work to do. So then the question is like, well, what do we do? And what is that work? And that's kind of what we're interested in looking at Leadership Louisville.
And we're going to be doing more of that in this discussion as well. I'm laughing because Paula McCraney, we all know Paula. She said, women understand that to be a leader, you have to have followers. Men, on the other hand, don't necessarily care if anyone is following them. This difference is what makes women have what it takes to lead. Knowing you have followers makes you stop every now and then to at least acknowledge, motivate, and encourage your followers. If you think you're leading but have no followers, you're simply taking a walk. Matt Brown says you don't have to have followers, you have to have confidence, and women have all the confidence needed. So we have a little bit of back and forth going on in the chat, which I absolutely love. Carolyn Tandy, let me bring you into this. You've had many leadership positions. Yes. I want to know where you think we are, but more importantly, as a Black woman, does it make it tougher, more complicated? Let's have you tackle that part, if you don't mind.
Oh, I absolutely believe being a Black woman is more complicated in this world right now. I'll tell you though, one thing as I was listening to Cynthia and to Gretchen and the stats in particular, one thing that kind of popped in my mind, Rachel, is the fact that women are in a position to help other women succeed. It's not just about us trying to turn the leaf with the men. It's also about how do we create an environment where we can be supportive of other women being successful and put that into our muscle memory. Because I think sometimes we're in a situation where we think we're in competition with each other. Mm-hmm. And we're not. We're not crabs in a barrel. This is about us being able to see that when one of us is successful, we're all being successful.
Yay.
We have to put that in our muscle memory, because I think the way society has us sitting here, it puts us in a situation where, as a Black woman, I see myself, or should see myself, in competition with white women. That's not where I see myself. I see myself as equally being an opportunity with my white colleagues, with my Hispanic colleagues, and we all should be rising together. So if I am able to be successful, I am not doing that at the deference of someone who is not a person of color. Am I making sense? All
Yeah.
of us need to rise together. All of us need to build that into our muscle memory to be able to see that we are all together in this. And the numbers don't prove that to be true, my friend Cynthia, as you see, with the 2 women African-American CEOs. So we have a lot more runway and opportunity. But that just means I need more of my white sisters to be able to help us get there. And so if we can all see that we're in it together and not, again, crabs in a barrel, I think we'll all benefit from that.
You know, Carolyn, that's an interesting point, and not just the concept of Black women competing against white women, but Black women competing against other Black women. We often hear women in corporate spaces say, you know, I might be edged out because they're not going to be more than one of us in the room.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And
then we're forced to be this.
Yeah.
We're being put in a situation where we have to speak for the entire race. We have to speak for the entire gender. We have to, you know, we are the experience of everybody. But I think we have, like I said, we just have to put ourselves in a position where we understand we're all in the same boat. We're all rowing in the same muck. And to not see it as being a competition of one group versus another, but rather an opportunity for us all to rise. And for us to know that there's some of us who are in the boat that need a little bit more help. We need a little bit more extra opportunity because it hasn't been afforded to us.
Yeah, and we know that there's no such thing as your side of the boat is sinking, right?
That's right.
And it's got water in it. It's going down.
It's the whole boat.
Right? Representative Samara Heaven, I want to bring you in because we talked a little bit earlier about your youth and your energy. And I'm just curious about how you feel like you've been perceived in the legislature and what is it you think that women can bring to the table? And I know, you know, you're a Republican, Representative Stevenson is a Democrat, but can you speak in terms of not in partisan ways, but in how just in a general way of politicking that women can be very valuable in those rooms where it happens, right?
Yeah. You know, I shared this whenever I was with Rachel a year ago, but my very first day into the General Assembly, it was during the interim, I walked into a committee hearing and I heard someone say, oh, that's Representative Heverin. And I was like, no one's ever cared who I am. Like, this is cool. Like my mom has, but you know, so I'm walking in, I'm kind of feeling myself. And I walk in to get introduced by another senator and he says, oh, I want to introduce you. And the other senator says, oh, is this our new intern? And I laughed and, you know, I was like, no, I'm your new colleague. And, you know, but everyone has been so welcoming. And I think it's because I kind of come back at them sometimes. One of the representatives from Louisville, he looked at me one day, he said, Samara, I have socks and ties that are older than you. And I just looked at him and I said, I have nothing as old as you. I think we're able to make comedy out of it, you know, and I really think a lot of people look at me as their little sister and they want to see me succeed. And that was the biggest surprise my first session was that both Republicans and Democrats wanted to see me succeed being young. And I really appreciated that because I think it gave me the confidence going into my second session to really dive into some issues that affect everyone or that are very important, you know, working with the Anti-Racism Kentucky and really bringing issues that are nonpartisan to a light that we need to have conversations about. But I think one thing that women bring to the table, you know, I always say the more voices that we have, the better policy is going to be because there's better representation. And I think women sometimes look at things differently, not saying, you know, we all have our different life experiences. And so I think women have a different life experience. And one of those big conversations we can have is about paid family leave. You know, we see that this session, I was able to pass my adoption leave bill that gave adoptive families it gave them leave, whether it was paid or unpaid by their employer. But having conversations like that, I think that issues that really affect women, you know, I was reading the other day in the Skim how in New Zealand, they gave 3 days off to women that had miscarriages. And I just thought, you know, I was texting Representative Jason Nemes. I was like, let's talk about this. Let's do this. Because I know he's so supportive of talking about paid family leave. And so I think that when we bring women to the table, they just have different perspectives and they've had different life experiences than men have. And that's okay to acknowledge.
And Colonel Stevenson, let's bring you into this because you you retired after a 27-year career in the Air Force. And I said, you could have sailed off into the wonderful sunset at that point, and then you ended up going into the legislature. You're only the second Black woman now in the legislature, so there's representation with that. Did you think about that, and did it weigh on you at all or not?
I'm used to being the only Black, the only short person, the only person with short hair in every room I go in. And so it's like in the military, it is a white man's world, especially at the officer ranks. And the higher up you go, the less women and the less Blacks. For a long time, I was the only Black colonel in the JAG Corps, female. There were 4 men, see, I can count them, 4. But I had to adopt myself to what's needed, what's wanted, and not have that stop me. It's sometimes when you walk into a room and they all look at you like, what, why are you here? It's like Samara said, you have to give it back. Well, why are you here? Did your mama send you? And it made, one time I had a general say to me, do you say everything that goes across your brain? I said, it depends. But going back to women tapping you on the shoulder and women making sure that other women are successful is what I did in the military. And I had a deal that I'll mentor Blacks, I'll mentor women, but I'm going to mentor white boys too, because they need to see competence everywhere. And if you agree to that, sir, I can do it. And because what we were finding was that the expectations that women would work in the military for 15-hour days, but they still had to go home, cook, clean, take care of the kids, make sure the husband was satisfied, make sure the household was running, and then come back 3 hours later. And it was killing them. It was, especially those who did not have a spouse that supported what they were doing. So it goes back to what Samara said with her young brain, expectations, and also reaching back and making sure that we tell people, you can do it, and why aren't you doing it? I'm not going to have this conversation about you're not enough. Let's just put that aside. It's going to be there always. And let's talk about what you can do.
Imposter syndrome, right? I don't think there's no treatment or cure for it. And Colonel Stevenson, you really hit on a point that we would now want to segue into, and that is about the importance of mentorship. And it's not just peer-to-peer, but it's also to those who are opposite our gender. And I want to start with you, Carolyn Tandy, about who was it that you would think are your great mentors who helped nurture you throughout your ascension?
I tell you what, Renee, I had some wonderful, wonderful women who saw things in me way back when that I just didn't see in myself. And I tell a story, I'm not going to tell the whole story now, but I'll just tell a snippet of it because I think it's powerful. I remember when I was in Washington and I was just so happy to just be in Washington. I took any old job that they gave me. I was just happy to be there. But then along the way, I realized that my colleague was getting paid almost 4 times what I was getting paid. And here I am sneaking off to happy hours to feed myself. And here he was telling me, you should be defending yourself. You should be looking out for yourself. And we should go in there and tell them, this is the party of all people, the Democratic Party at the time. So I went in there to my executive director and she was wonderful to me. She told Jeff, who was my partner in crime, she appreciated how he was advocating for me, but she asked him to leave and have a private conversation. And she told me that part of my problem is that I underestimated myself in the first place. And I would do myself and all the women a favor if I would just leave the position that was beneath me, which was beyond me. I mean, at that point, I was like, I don't even know what she's saying to me right now. I need this good job. But what she was trying to say is that as women, we sometimes just take any situation that's being given to us. We don't advocate for our salary. We don't advocate for our benefits. We just are happy just to say yes to whatever they give us, rather than doing our homework and being able to say, this is what I'm worth. This is what I bring to the table. This is what the positions that are like my position are also being paid by the men in these roles. And this is what I'm now going to put as my expectation. and it's not something to negotiate. This is my expectation. So if you're looking for me to come and work with you, then this is what you need to deliver. That type of confidence doesn't come, honey.
Okay,
That
we're
kind of
all going
confidence.
snaps, but okay, let's raise our hand in this panel. How many have gone to bat for themselves? Now, I will say, when I use in my former life, I had to do my own contract negotiations. And I would say in the first or the second one, I was horrible. I will say by the end, I got a lot better and I was self-taught in how to do it because I had never done it. So raise your hand if you've gone to bat for yourself and you've said, I am worth more than that. Yay to the women on the panel. But okay, how many did it the first time? Was it a learned? Okay. I was
so
curious.
I'll tell you that so we teach negotiation. We teach a class called Find Your Voice. And we started teaching it because I looked at the math of how, there's a pay equity issue, right? And some of that is owned by a system that is larger than we are, right? That needs to be dismantled, needs to have light shed on it. But one of the things that we always like to do is we like to think about, yes, there are these big systemic things, but are there things that I can do personally that advance my own cause? Negotiation is one of the things that we can do personally to lessen the gap, right? And to advance our own cause. And we just don't do it. And so we decided that it was going to be part of our curriculum, part of what we teach. And I get super, super excited when women leave the class and they come back to me later and they're like, how'd it go?
Right.
It doesn't always go well though.
No, well, and I'm looking in the Scarlett wrote, women aren't necessarily looked on well when they go to bat for themselves. And I will say a male boss, I mean, he kind of was like, man, and I will tell you, I wore like a badge of honor when he basically thought I gave him hell. I was like, you know what? I'll take that. And I'm not gonna let that deter me for going to bat for myself. And it is though, because sometimes women are not looked upon the same way as their male counterparts when they go to bat for themselves. Would you all agree with that, women on the panel?
I'd agree with that, and I also want to say sometimes we engage in the wrong conversation. Like for example, they're playing checkers and we're playing chess. For example, I remember growing up on the cover of Ms. Magazine, it says, who's the better mother, stay-at-home moms or those who work? And we engaged in that nonsense. Or the other part that I remember growing up was they consistently said PMS was not a real thing. Women were in their minds that you didn't have cramps. It was biologically impossible. So we walked around thinking, okay, it's something wrong with me because the doctor said cramps didn't exist. So
is that a male doctor?
Yes, all male doctors. All male doctors. And then they named it PMS, and it's a real thing. So I think part of it is sometimes we engage in the wrong conversation. I'm not going to engage in conversations that doesn't have a payoff. Your opinion about whether or not I'm a good mother doesn't matter. Talk to my kids. One in China, one has her own business. Let's talk about that.
And I think we have to acknowledge that people do face different repercussions for speaking up, which is why, a lot of our work sometimes with leadership or thinking of political power as individual power. And I think we have to reframe what success looks like. We have to reframe what our goal is. And our goal is really fundamentally, I think, changing what power looks like. Because, sometimes you can fix things, but if there's a bad policy on violence in the workplace or a bad policy on anti-racism in the workplace or a policy that doesn't allow for family leave, Representative Heverin, it's going to actually impact all women. So what if the negotiations are not just about individual power, but are more collective when it's safer, or for those who maybe can speak up a little bit more, have less to lose, and are about some of that policy change. And I think the good thing about women leaders across partisan lines is the more we get in office, the more we are working on those kinds of policies that change those structural barriers to power. And so I just think it's really important for us to think about the idea of collective power, of rising together, and how we focus on the policies and dismantling a lot of those so that we can get equal pay and be at home with our kids or caregive or live free from violence in the workplace, those gendered issues that really hold women back.
One thing I do, Renee, I'm going to jump forward just a little bit because we're running a little bit behind and I know you've got to leave at 7. So I want to get to this. We talked about power. There was a very powerful moment recently on the House floor with Colonel Stevenson that I'd like to play. So everybody watch this. Oh, we'll see if we can get it back up there. We'll try one more time.
Preacher to another. I agree with everything you said about God's love. But let me tell you this. Things were bad in this country for Black folk before 1962. You can't tell me that we had a good life. And yes, I'm upset. I had to teach my son how to drive while Black. And you want to tell me about putting God back in school or putting Christ back in Christians? Don't you dare ever propose to know what it's like to be less than, what it's like to be in a country that disowns you, what it's like to be lynched, what it's like to be raped, what it's like to be a nothing. There are good police officers, and when I call 911, I want one to come with a gun. But what you said about putting love back in is what's needed for all people, that same level of passion for all people, Asians, Blacks, Browns, Kermit the Frog, everybody, for God's people.
And Renee, I should have set that up with, that was when they were debating no-knock warrants. And a lawmaker said things were good in America until 1962 when they took prayer out of school. And that was what Representative Stevenson was answering. So Renee, you pick it up from there. I'm sorry.
I remember that. That was the late nights. I mean, we had a couple of late nights, and I think I was writing the show script at the time, and I instantly went, whoo. Of course, we used it in our show too that night. And I remember, for me, it wasn't necessarily what you said, because that's my reality, but it was also how you said it. And I felt your passion, your righteous anger that night, not directed at Representative Chris Fugate necessarily, but about a system that had brewed, just where we are right now. And I want you to take yourself out of that moment in the issue that it was and describe how that is an example of leadership, though. I mean, how does that posit itself as leadership?
Well, if you're in a chamber where there's 75 Republicans, 25 Democrats, where they're primarily men, where they just gave him a standing ovation for saying God's love is all that's needed, then you gotta be willing to say what's needed to be said for those who are watching that can't speak for themselves. And you gotta say it in a way where people hear you and they don't feel like you're saying they suck. Personally. Now, right after that, I have to tell you, it was 11:30 and I was tired. I'm gonna go to bed at 9 o'clock person. And I was hungry. And I was like, if they don't shut up so we can go home. But when I heard him say, wait a minute, in 1962, my father had to run through Portland to get home so he wouldn't get beat up. That was in 1950 and the 60s. It wasn't good. And if you can speak in a way that gets other people to think, no, wait a minute. I didn't know that. And right after that, I was more upset because I didn't have a mask on. And my seatmate said, here, I got a fresh mask, take the mask. But right after that, something miraculous happened. Samara was the first one to come over. She got up out of her seat, walked around the chamber and sat there and held me. And then the guy the rep who made the statement, he was right after her.
All right.
And he said, can I break protocol and hug you? Samara didn't ask.
Well,
Women don't ask.
let's
I
talk
love you,
about that
girl.
moment. Samara, what was it that resonated? And you as a leader as well, though, getting up and going right to her, that was just an automatic response. Tell me about that moment with you. What was it?
I just had it's one of those moments where you feel like you just got to do something. Like if you don't get up and make an action, you're going to explode. And I just love Pam. And I thought it was so brave of her to stand up in front of a crowd. I mean, we have very few Black people on the House floor and we have very few women. And to stand up and share her heart like that, I just wanted to go love her. And I saw how upset she was. And I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I'm here to love you. And I really feel like that's an opportunity for me to just show my love. And I respect Pam so much. And I just thought she was so brave. And I think that's true leadership, is going against the grain and just really sharing how you feel in a moment. And so many times you can just sit there and not say a word and you can be angry. But how does that teach others? And so I've loved getting to know Pam, and she is such an encourager and an empowerer, and she's empowered me in times that I wanted to feel like she was being empowered too.
So leadership both ways there, Rachel, right? They both
Absolutely.
And look at.
Can I just say something real fast? Pam, sister, it is, I know you. So to see you almost having an out of body experience. I mean, like even your suit was talking to the cat. I mean, even her suit was coming for you, and Pam is just so sweet and kind, but she is just speaking truth to power in this moment and saying the words that we all wanted to say. I just thank you, sister, for just having the courage to be everything that you're to be in that moment. A representative is one that speaks for many. You have your own voice, but you speak for many.
Well, and within that moment, your authentic self. And so Gretchen and Cynthia, let's have you weigh on that. And then Renee, we're going to jump to questions because I want to get in a few before you have to get off. Cynthia and Gretchen, one thing that we talked about, I know you all said authentic self. To me, it doesn't get more authentic than what we just witnessed on the House floor. Would you all respond to that? Other advice that you would give about authentic voice?
Can I break in super quick before?
Oh, yeah.
So I want to say something that Carolyn Tandy said. She's talking about how we need to empower women and not look at people as competition. And really, I think in that moment too, it was a chance to empower another woman who was sharing her heart. And I think that the more we can do that, I think it's important. Whether you've got a title or anything, we're all human. And whenever we're able just to love on each other and be kind, if we can raise each other up, that's how we're going to empower other women to seek leadership positions and be interested.
I think it's interesting, though, Samara, that a female was the one who went over and embraced first. I give credit to the other lawmaker who she was speaking to, who did also as well. Maybe you all can take me, and Renee, you saw it. What was the reaction on the House floor to it? I mean, there was some applause, I heard.
Was that just from Democrats?
I think they were shocked. They really were like, what just happened? What just happened? Now, am I a racist if I clap or if I don't clap? There was a lot going on at the same time. And I think they really, based on the conversations we had afterwards, it really was, what is going on? What just happened? Did I miss something? Where do I need to true myself up to? And then you have your cowboys. They're just like, okay, next.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing I just want to say too about Samara is the power of an ally, right? The power of an ally to be in that moment to say, sister, I see you and I'm here to validate you and I'm here to love on you. And we may be different, but we're the same. I see you. That's just so powerful to me.
And I think perhaps that even segued more, Carolyn, from just not being an ally, but an accomplice, right? Conspirator, right? Because if leadership quality is about morality, there was no greater demonstration of that.
That's right.
Not just from Colonel Stevenson, but also from Representative Heverin. And so it's full circle, indeed. Quite a moment.
I loved it. Cynthia, Gretchen, do you want to weigh in before we bring Ron Jones in with some questions?
The only thing I would say is one thing that I hear over and over again about women running for office is fear. And I think we haven't talked about fear, but it is essential to believe in yourself that no matter what happens, and I've run for office and lost, that you will get back up again and that other people will do it. And it's going through that fear, as Representative Stevenson and Representative Hebron just talked about, that going through that fear of difficult things, difficult conversations, vulnerability, that we will get to a better world on the other side of this, because that's what you all just talked about. But we have to really acknowledge that it is normal to feel fear and to not be afraid even to fail and get back up again.
And don't even try to get rid of the fear. Take action anyway.
Do it afraid.
Do it afraid. And I'm glad I did now, only because the number of people who said, I got something to say and I'm going to go say it. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the choices that we make. It's not the fear. It's the choice that something else is more important. So focusing on the thing that's something else that's more important is the magic, right? There's a reason why Brene Brown, like, has anyone on here not read her book yet? Because I think everybody has like subscribed to her theory. There's a reason why her books and everything are so popular right now. It's because she speaks about the power of vulnerability and authenticity. And it's a message that we all want to hear right now. It's a message that is resonating with all of us. We are so tired of armored leadership.
Right.
We are ready for something more daring and something more authentic. And the voice is pretty clear that we're ready for it. So now we just need some women to step into that, to jump, and then that will appear.
Well, I'm loving, Nora says, do it afraid is my new favorite inspiration. Thank you. So you all have inspired. And Samara and Pam, thank you for sharing that story and your reaction, Samara. I love that. That was just so terrific to hear. All right, Renee, we're going to get to Ron Jones. We're going to bring him in. And Ron, we hope that you have some questions for our panelists.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, let's get going.
All right. Now, I got to give the radio station some props, because when they found out that I was coming over here and that I was the only male, and they got together on some questions from some of their perspectives. So I want to share some of those with you, okay?
All right.
First was this one. Building a network is an important leadership skill that goes beyond the boardroom and day-to-day meeting. As women in leadership, how do you utilize networking as an opportunity to enhance your opportunity in a male-dominated organization?
Anyone want to tackle that one?
So I'll just make a plug for sponsorship. Because we talked a little bit about mentorship. We talked about allies and accomplices. But the other thing that we haven't talked about, which is a kind of critical piece of your network, is your network needs sponsors. Sponsors talk about you in rooms where you cannot be, like, and they, like, they talk about you in a good way, right? Not a bad way. But looking for those people, I think, is part of how you use your network to move forward, is thinking about, well, in those rooms, who's carrying my water? But it's also a reverse thing, right? Which, Carolyn was talking about earlier, is if you get to be in that room where those discussions are being had, whose water are you carrying too? But sponsors use their capital, they invest in you. And I think that's kind of a critical piece of network.
Ron, I'm going to add on to Cynthia's comments. I love the concept of collecting people, and to see people as being able to add to your network always. I think sometimes even when we change careers or we change employers, we tend to have people with us and then we move on to the next one and we develop new relationships. And I think it's important for us to always cultivate the folks that have been afforded you along the way, because that is exactly what builds onto your network. Everyone knows I don't meet a stranger. I try really hard at keeping people in my network, because you never know when you'll need them. You never know when you may not be able to have a conversation inside your walls. You may need to have a conversation outside the walls to be able to do and be more productive inside your walls. So being able to have folks who are with you that you know have been able to be carried with you along the way is really, really important. You have to work at it. You know, just as my friend Gretchen before the call was like, I need you to do blah, 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 blah. Honey, you need to be able to catch them when you can catch them. I love that. I love it because that is the type of relationship or connection that we can have, that nothing is in boundaries, right? You have to always be able to see that people can add value to you wherever they may go. So it's really important you work at collecting people, keeping people in your pocket.
Very good. And Renee, I know we're closing in on the 7 o'clock hour, and I know you, speaking of multitasking, have to go MC something else or moderate it. So do you have any final words before you have to bow out? We'll keep going with a few more questions.
Sure. Well, I just want to say how empowered I am. You know, I'm so proud to be in this little orbit of women who each and every one of you I admire for the same and different reasons. And I'm getting to know Cynthia. She doesn't know, but an invitation to come on my program is forthcoming because I fell in love with her during the LEAD conference by the Personnel Cabinet, the governor's office on diversity. And she just brought truth with Carolyn. And I've known Gretchen for a while. And I'm getting to know Colonel Stevenson and Representative Heverin. And Rachel, you know how fond I am of you. And I think that today's conversation just speaks to how we all need to be each other's rocks. And, you know, to put aside the whole thing about there can only be one queen bee. It doesn't matter what color she is, there only is room for one. And the more of us who break through that ceiling, the more that we can really make a difference. And I know that women, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, when they're in those spaces, not just in the seats, but in the leadership roles and in the rooms where it happens, decisions are made for the good of the greater cause, not just for some selfish ambition. And we know that women bring that. And I'm glad that I've been surrounded by women who demonstrate that every single day. And it's been a pleasure to be with you. So I salute all of you.
Well,
especially.
and same here. We love you, Renee. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Okay.
Okay. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. We're going to go through a few more questions, and then I want everybody to stick around. Please don't leave. We're not completely done yet. We've got some then and now pictures with these women offering their younger selves some advice. So Ron, let's get to 2 or 3 more questions. We'll plow through a couple of them quickly so we can get to that great advice.
Okay. This question actually came in for our representative, Samara.
Now I'm having trouble hearing you, Ron.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. This is actually for Representative Heverin. All right. Is there a way to relate?
Look straight into for some reason, when you turn your head, we can't hear you. So
Got you. How about now?
Yeah. Ask
Okay.
the question straight on like that.
Is there a way to relate and gain respect from your colleagues who are older than you in order to be taken serious or considered for advancement?
You know, I think that respect is such a thing. I think we all earn it the same way, right? By building relationships. And while I do like to talk about my age a lot, just being a generational voice, I don't always I look at myself the same. Like I look at someone that's 70 and we both have to earn respect the same way. That's human. And I don't, as for advancement, I just think whenever you build relationships and have a lot of respect for people, that's how you advance. And it's like the networking that we talked about. And, I respect so many people for their views, even if they're different than mine, because we all have power in our voice and how we believe, even if it's different. And so I think that, earning respect, among my colleagues, I'm very blunt and honest. And I think you love me for who I am. I'm not going to be different than how I always am. I'm not going to be different when I'm, on the floor or in a back room. I'm going to always be the same and be honest, because I think that we deserve that. But I think that's a really great question. But I really think that just respect is earned no matter, it's the same way, no matter your age. But I do think it helps when you have respect to advance. Does that answer the question?
It's somewhat, I've got 2 young daughters, okay? So one of these questions kind of like goes with this.
Okay.
Is there a divide? Is there a generational divide with younger and older women in leadership?
You know, I'm going to say there's a generational divide, period. Whether you're a man or a woman, you know, we had a lot of conversations about about the anti-racism coalition. It was my house was House Bill 364, and there's just a lot of issues have generations, and there are generational divides among women too, because sometimes older women don't want to be brought out that they're a woman. You know, it's just like I'm equal to everybody, whereas me, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm a young female. Let's do this. And so I think there is a generational divide between younger women and older women, but there's also a generational divide between humans.
All right, Ron, one more.
Yes. What do you think is the most significant barrier in female leadership?
All right, let's have everyone quickly weigh in on that. What is the biggest barrier?
Most significant barrier in female leadership.
All right, let's have everybody answer that one real quickly. Pam, you go first.
I'm not enough.
Okay. Gretchen?
Sexist and racist patriarchal structures.
Cynthia?
Courage. Get in life what you have the courage to ask for.
Carolyn?
I like courage.
Samara?
I like courage as well. It takes a lot of courage.
Is there another quick one like that, Ron? Because that
Did you say barrier or characteristic? I clearly answered that one wrong. Sorry.
Barrier.
Okay.
It's both though.
Yeah,
You
kind of
have
both
to
ways.
have that. Otherwise,
Is there one more, Ron, that's fast
Yes.
like that we can
All right.
bang out? Okay.
What women inspires you and why?
All right, let's make this one real fast too. Samara, we're going to start with you.
My mama.
Because?
She raised me to be an executive, is what she always says, but she worked really hard. She was 20 when she had me, and she worked really hard to get where she was going through college when I was young, and now she's the director of special education. So she just inspires me to work hard and not to give up on whatever I want to do in life.
Love that. Pam?
I have to go with my mom. She's my biggest cheerleader. And no matter what it takes, she makes sure I have what I need to do what I need to do.
Carolyn?
My mom is absolutely my hero, and I would not be here without her. But she was not the person I was going to respond to with. The person I would say is certainly my hero was Senator Georgia Davis Powers.
And we know why, for all the right reasons, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
Cynthia?
I'm going to go with Colonel Pam today.
I love that.
Don't make me cry in public.
All right, Gretchen?
My mom.
How come?
She taught me the sense of caring for the world and for putting others before yourself, and compassion, profound compassion and love.
Very good. All right, Ron, we're going to kind of switch. Thank you for facilitating for us. Hang around. Now we're going to go to the then and now pictures, giving advice to your younger self. So LP will call those up if you don't mind. And we're going to start with Representative Hebron. We had to have you go way back since you're only 29. We said, okay, go back to when you were a little girl and find us a picture. The advice you would give to your younger self would be what?
I was always made fun of for being so tall, and I was so embarrassed by that. You know, someone would be like, you're like an Amazon woman in elementary school. And the advice I'd give my younger self is embrace who you are and embrace who God made you to be, because there's no better thing that you can offer to the world than yourself. And so I would, encourage and kick ass. Like, let's do this, girls. That's what I tell you.
I love that. And Pam, I'm going to segue to you, because when we did an interview recently, that's kind of what you said, be able to do you. You said, when you try to be somebody else, it never works. Do you? So what would you say looking at that younger self there in that uniform?
I say, you're enough. You got it. Go get it.
Love that. All right. Our next, Gretchen Hunt. And Gretchen, I want to know I know where that picture was, what year, and tell me about that picture of your younger self.
I believe it's spring of 1994 at a women's march for choice in DC. And I would tell my younger self to keep up your passion.
All right. Carolyn Tandy. Love these.
Don't you love the big shoulder pads?
I love that. I remember those shoulder pads.
My advice to myself, I always talk about the 5 B's. Be brief, brother, be brief. But for me, my advice would be brave, sister, be brave. Be brave, baby, be brave. Yeah.
I love that. And that is something we keep hearing over and over tonight. The courage, do it afraid if you have to. It's a resounding message tonight for sure. All right. And we're going to end with the crown and Cynthia and Apec.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I've already said this, but I keep it on a Post-it note by my desk because it's the advice I wish I had stumbled across earlier in life, which is you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. I wish that I had known then, make big asks, all the time. That's the advice. Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. And I think our audience, just by their comments, have been very inspired, have taken everything you've said to heart. And I think maybe, change some spirits tonight, that maybe we won't have to ask the next female to run for public office after this discussion tonight. They're just going to do it. They'll have the courage and they will do it afraid. And I think it's
Hey,
okay.
wait, Renee, what would be your advice to yourself?
Well, she had to go.
No, I'm sorry, Rachel.
Oh,
Yes.
I would just do it like you all said. I think so many times, I was like, what you all have said, am I good enough? And I would sit back instead of just doing it. And where I think our male counterparts, no, do they even care if they're, good enough? And that's what I'm saying. They just jump into the pool. And sometimes I think women, while I think it's a treasured quality though, to think about things and think it through, which I tend to do, sometimes I think it through too much and you don't want to miss the opportunity because of that. So I guess that would be one of the things. Anybody final thoughts before I wrap things up? You all have been so great.
No, I love that. Rachel, I can just really put myself into that motion as well, that I really put myself in situations where I'm stopping myself from my opportunities because you just think too much.
Right.
And, going back to Gretchen's point about our intelligence, I think women are so intelligent. We just think too much and may even talk ourselves out of our own possibilities. Whereas, our male counterparts may not think as clearly about these things. They just jump. So it's important for us to not stand in our own way. Just really grateful for the voices I was able to gather with today. Just really love these women and just appreciate everything that you add to our communities. Thank you.
And be allies. I think that was another point I realized early on in a very competitive industry that I was in and had worked in an environment that was competitive with women, and it broke my heart. And I said, if I do anything, I will change that the tent is big enough for all of us. And when I succeed or somebody else succeeds, we all succeed. And I think that we've all learned that and heard that tonight as well. And I think that's a great thing to take away. Ladies, women are one of my favorite topics. So thank you. You just inspired me for the rest of the evening and throughout the week. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
all
so
of
much.
you ladies.
And have a few more things to say.
Spectacular being.
Don't leave just yet. Have a couple more things to say. We want to thank our panelists. And I want to let everybody know we're going to be sending our audience a list of resources, suggested reading from all of these panelists in the next couple of days in your email. So take a look for that. Our next discussion, just to let you know, on May 25th for another Let's Talk Bridging the Divide conversation, Jumpstarting Downtown Louisville. It has been a year like no other. We have assembled a terrific panel to talk about Louisville coming back stronger, better, and more equitable for all. It will be from 7 to 8:30. You can register at FrazierMuseum.org/Let's Talk. Our special thanks to Renee Shaw again, who had to leave a little early, always brings class and smarts to the table. As we say goodnight to all women in leadership and making their way up the ladder, be an ally for other women. We are better and stronger together. I would say amen, but instead I'm going to say a woman to that. Ladies, thank you all so much. My privilege to be with you tonight. And to our audience, thank you for your great questions. Appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.